Hello, Internet, and today is going to be another book opinion. I'm going to tell you my opinion on a book. Today's book is going to be American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I listened to this on audiobook, and it was a mighty wonderful audiobook. I do want to warn everybody, if you are interested in reading this book and have bought this book or thinking about getting this book, let it be known that there is an extended version and there's a not extended version. Apparently, when this book originally came out, there was word cuts and chapter cuts in the first edition copy sold out, and then there was a special edition that only had 200 copies that was extended with bonus chapters and thoughts and everything in it. Nowadays, they usually sell that extended version. Make sure you get the extended version. I think they only sell that extended version now. I don't know why they did it in the beginning. Like I said, I get frustrated when publishers just don't give you the book with all the content in it, with all the bonus chapters, with all the little short stories, and they try to give you the shorthand book version and then later come out with the superseded, this has all the extras version, and then it'd be the same damn price for both. It's fucking annoying, and I don't know why they did it. But be aware that if you buy older copies, they might not have all of the information in it, and you can know the extended copy because it has a bonus chapter where the main character talks to Jesus. So that's cool. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that in case you are curious about this book and you want to read it at some point. So like I said, I read this one on audiobook. It's a really, really long book. There's many parts to it, and I very much enjoyed it. So there's kind of like two parts to this. So the main story is about this man named Shadow, and he is just now getting out of his stint in prison, and he's thinking, oh, I'm gonna go back home, I'm gonna meet my wife, we're gonna get over this, we're gonna move on. But stuff happens, and he doesn't get what he thought he was gonna get when he gets out of prison. Instead, he meets up with this man called Mr. Wednesday, and Mr. Wednesday tells Shadow that he has a job opportunity for him, and if Shadow becomes his bodyguard and watches out for Mr. Wednesday, then Shadow will get reimbursed for his time and effort. And Shadow gets wrapped up into this world of gods because Mr. Wednesday is an old god. So this whole book follows Shadow following around Mr. Wednesday while Mr. Wednesday, an old god, talks to various other old gods, and then we have a war situation between the old gods and the new gods. So the old gods refer to any god that we learn about in mythology, all of those gods. So Odin, Thor, Zeus, Anansi, all of those are old gods. Creatures that are a part of the mythological category are all counted as gods in this book. So fairies, leprechauns, those also count as gods. Jinn or genies, those count as gods. God pretty much in this universe is defined as a concept made real, which is what I found most fascinating about this series. The idea that an idea can come to life. The way that it's described, the reason why old gods are dying and new gods are being created and gaining power is because a god is an idea that humans have. They feed off of humans and need humans to survive. A human creates an idea, believes in the idea, has faith in the idea, and the idea grows so much that it has power. However, the moment that that idea starts to falter, it starts to lose ground, and people start forgetting it and no longer supporting that idea, it becomes dead. So that's why the old gods are dying. They're being forgotten. Their ideas no longer exist. But also why some old gods, while they don't have power, still do exist. Like, say, Odin. His idea is still alive. People still know Odin. People still know of Anansi. People still know of leprechauns. So they still have power to them, even if they're not believed and worshipped. And yet other gods, like say Easter in the book, live and thrive because while they are not directly worshipped, their idea is worshipped. The celebrations around them that brought them to life is worshipped. And so I found it really fascinating that humans had the power, the ability to create something so magical and mystical, so powerful, that an idea came to life, and as soon as that idea was forgotten, it was dead. And the reality of that, because when we think about it, the dead are forgotten when the last person who remembers them dies. That idea that ideas can die, that as soon as no one puts forth effort into them, they are also gone. Which also brought in the intriguing concept of the new gods, because these were new ideas worshipped, where we had the god of like Wi-Fi, of television, of a large super chain of grocery store, where these were the new gods that we worshipped because they're the new ideas that humans now have created and put stock in, these ideas that they believe in, that they worship in some way. And if these ideas at any point in time are forgotten or left behind or barely recognized, then they too can become like the old gods. So we follow around Shadow, and he's learning about all these different gods, and he is firmly on the old god side, being hired by Mr. Wednesday. And we go through the whole thing. We go through from the very beginning, him just meeting different gods, his experience with different gods, his experience with the supernatural, and him just along for the ride. Shadow is very much like not a one-sided character, but he's very much a person you sit with and you watch through his eyes. He is like his namesake. He is a shadow. He is there to exist for you to live off, for you to see through. So I thought that was really, really cool. This has very, very different parts of the story to it. I think that's probably why it became a television show, which is because in the book there are very distinguishable separate parts to it. Like there's one part where Mr. Wednesday and him go to visit an older god. There's one part where Mr. Wednesday leaves him behind in a small town, and those parts seem like completely different episodes from each other, even when they're contained in the same book. It also helps when the second part of this big huge story comes in, and that is the world before sort of parts, or coming to America parts of the book. So every once in a while throughout the book there'll be chapters that are completely separate from Shadow himself, and we'll be talking about other people and their experiences with the gods. And we see these different little instances of when someone comes to America or something that involves the gods in general, and how that is built. So we see Shadow's perspective and how Shadow feels when he is communicating and talking and experiencing life alongside gods, but we also see the gods apart from that, apart from Shadow, and within their own stories with other people's perspectives about it. And it's very, very intriguing because you get to see not only Shadow's story, which is of course the main story, but you also get to see the concept of gods outside of Shadow, the concept of these living ideas outside of Shadow, and you really get the feeling that they existed long before him and they will exist long after. This isn't a story where the story relies on the main character for everything to make sense, or the story revolves around the main character, or it seems like, oh, this world was so impossible to exist, but this main character introduced it to us. Like, we get the feeling that this was there long before this character. This was there and existed long before Shadow ever got involved, long before we were ever privy to the story, and will continue long after by having Shadow's parts, but also having these interluding chapters of the Come to America bits, where you just get that sake of this much larger, much richer world, which makes for a very, very interesting book. If I would say to recommend this book to anyone, I would recommend it to people who are really into old mythology, simply for the fact that I think it's more enjoyable for you if you have some familiarity with mythology. Not that you have to know mythology and really have a good concept of mythology to like this book, simply that when I read this book, I have a fascination with mythology, so automatically I was more intrigued by it by putting things together, because never does Neil Gaiman completely tell you who a god is. He doesn't outright say, this god is here, this god is here, this is the god of what. Those are things that you have to put in, like Mr. Wednesday. They don't tell you what the real god name of Mr. Wednesday is, but if you're familiar with mythology, if you're familiar with how we got the days of the week, automatically you know who Mr. Wednesday is. You don't need any sort of trouble to figure that one out. When we meet characters like Mr. Nancy, like, I grew up with Tales of Nancy, so immediately as soon as I saw that character, I knew who it was. But like, again, that's not something that you're going to automatically know and be familiar with unless you have experienced those pieces of mythology outside of this book. So I feel like you get more out of it if you know a little bit about the mythology beforehand, simply because, like, while I knew most of the mythology, I didn't know ones like Bilquis. I didn't know one of the gods that Shadow meets beforehand, who, like, he plays chess with at one point. I didn't know much about that guy's mythology, so when it came to the end of the book and we get, like, more development on that god and everything, I was just slightly confused because I wanted more out of it. Like, I wanted to know more about this particular god because of the change between them, because of, like, what's going on, right? And I didn't know, and I couldn't fully grasp some of, like, the hidden details within the story because I wasn't already familiar with the mythology of that god. But with the other ones, like, say, Anansi, since I was already familiar with him, a lot of the characteristics that Mr. Anansi had in the book, I already knew where those pulled from. I already could infer extra things on it and know where that idea was going, even without it being explicitly stated. And since a lot of the times the names of these gods aren't explicitly stated, the name that you would research them, and, like, if you were looking them up online, it got a little difficult. I didn't know how to research some of the gods that had some sort of nickname within the book that may not be the first thing that pulls up on Google when I'm trying to figure out what the mythology of this god is. So that is one thing that I would want you to be aware of. Just, if you're really, really interested and invested in mythology, you may get more out of this book. If you are not, you will still enjoy this book, but sometimes some of the connections will go over your head simply because it's more helpful to have that background in mythology when it comes to some of these old gods. Overall, I really, really enjoyed the book. Like I said, the most fascinating concept was the idea that ideas that are worshipped become alive. The more that someone believes in one thing, the more that a collective community believes in one idea, the more life that idea has. That was really, really fascinating. That was my favorite part over the whole thing. I did really love the episodic nature of this book. You definitely got very different chunks as you moved forward. You never felt like you were on the same adventure all the time. There were very different pieces to this. I can't say this has a specific genre to it because each different portion of the book sort of has a different atmosphere to it, even if it all works together collectively. The Coming to America parts are just as fascinating, and they never feel intrusive. They never feel like they're taking away from the story. They never feel like they're leaving you on a cliffhanger when you're with Shadow. They just feel like an addition, like this nice, juicy addition to the story. Shadow himself is a very great character. I do think he's very much a character that was created for the reader to view through. Like, he is there as the eyes for the reader to experience this adventure through. At least that's how he came across for me. If anything, he is a very loyal character. I did like how his loyalty was played up, how when he got into this, like little battle and this war between old gods and new gods, how he stayed concrete. It was a very, very great characteristic to have Shadow, that his biggest characteristic was loyalty, how he was loyal to his wife, how he was loyal to the old gods, and how despite not really wanting to be in any of these situations half the time and really just wanting a simple and quiet life, how he was loyal to the things that still got him into a lot of trouble. Like, he was loyal to Mr. Wednesday, even though hanging around Mr. Wednesday usually got him in some weird trouble that he could have done without. One comment I'm going to make, just to anyone who has read this book and is just wanting to know my opinion on it, Laura ain't shit to me, and I regret nothing that happens to her. And I'm sorry if that comes across as a spoiler to any of you who are watching this who have never read this book, but just let it be known that I despise Laura and everything about her. She is one of the people that I can't stand in life because she unintentionally or intentionally hurts those around her. And I'm just sorry, but no. And I wanted to comment on that just so that you knew that yeah, I don't put up with people like that or characters like that. Can't stand them. Have you guys ever read American Gods? Have you watched the TV show? Is the TV show worth it? If you like what you're seeing here, you want to continue to see more, click all those bunnies down below. And goodbye, internet.